Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
Today, we are attempting something pretty ambitious. We're trying to map what you could almost call the source code of human narrative.
We're looking at Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 faces.
We are?
And I think we need to clear the air, right at the top. Because when most people hear Hero's Journey or Joseph Campbell, their minds usually jump to one of two things. First, they think of George Lucas sitting there with a notepad, basically outlining Star Wars.
Right, that's the big one.
Or they think of a very specific kind of motivational poster. The follow your bliss, find your passion, go on an adventure kind of thing.
It's really unfortunate
Oh.
because that's such a radical oversimplification of what this book is actually doing.
It's the Instagram version of the book.
It is, absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you actually sit down and read the text, especially this commemorative edition with the beautiful, dense introduction by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, you realize this is not a manual for screenwriters.
Not at all.
And it is definitely not a self-help book about finding a new hobby. It's a technical manual. I'd almost call it a technical manual for the human operating system.
A manual for the mind?
For consciousness itself, really. The core question we're grappling with in this deep dive is a systemic one. It's a question of architecture.
Okay.
Why is it that a myth from a remote tribe in the Congo, a dream that's reported by a patient in a New York City psychiatrist's office, a fairy tale from the frozen Arctic, and a 4,000-year-old Sumerian text, why do they all share the exact same structural pattern?
It is genuinely weird when you look at the data laid out like that. You would expect that a culture from a desert 3,000 years ago would have a completely different narrative logic than, say, someone in a modern city.
Of course.
The variables are all different, the environment, the technology, the social pressures. But Campbell's data set suggests the underlying code is identical.
It's functionally identical. Campbell, he gives it a name. He calls this underlying structure the monomyth.
The monomyth.
It's this shape-shifting yet constant story that seems to underpin human consciousness. And the whole reason we're covering this on Crisis in Perception, the reason this is so urgent right now, is that we are, I think, living through a catastrophic failure of that very system.
We usually talk about systems failure in terms of, economics or supply chains. You're saying we have a supply chain failure in meaning.
We have a crisis of context. That's a great way to put it. Modern secular societies have effectively smashed the machinery that used to help us transition from one stage of life to the next.
We've lost the rites of passage.
The rites of passage, the sacred zones, the shared stories. We've lost the systems that were designed to manage psychological transition.
So without those systems, what happens? We're just free. Is that the idea?
That's the illusion, isn't it? We think we're free. But Campbell's argument is that without these shared mythic frameworks, you're not left with freedom. You're left with a kind of chaotic drift. You're left with private, often very neurotic dream states because we just lack the shared cultural coherence to hold our psyches together. It's like we're trying to run a high-voltage current, which is life without any insulation.
Okay, so the mission for us today is to basically rebuild the schematic. Let's look at how this machine is supposed to work.
Let's do it.
We're going to dive into the mechanism of separation, initiation, and return. But before we get into the weeds of the story itself, help me understand Campbell's approach here, because he's reading these myths in a very different way than a historian would.
He is. And that is absolutely the crucial distinction to make. If you read a myth as a historian, you're asking, did this really happen? Or what does this tell us about agricultural practices in 500 BC?
Right, the literal truth.
The literal truth. Campbell doesn't care about that. He aligns himself with Freud and maybe more importantly with Jung. He treats myths not as history, but as controlled dreams.
Controlled dreams. Okay, break that down.
Well, think about your own dreams for a second. When you dream, your unconscious mind is trying to process your life, right? It's taking your specific personal anxieties, your boss, your rent, that argument you had, and it's turning them into symbols.
So my boss becomes a monster, or my rent is a ticking clock I can't find.
Exactly. But that's deeply personal. Your dream about your boss doesn't mean anything to me or to anyone else.
It's encrypted with my life.
Perfectly put. A dream is a personalized myth. It's quirked and distorted by your individual neuroses. But a myth is a depersonalized dream.
So it's a dream that's been scrubbed clean of the personal details?
Scrubbed, polished, and standardized over thousands and thousands of years of retelling. It's a dream where all the private quirks have been worn away, leaving only the structural truth that is valid for all of humankind.
That's a powerful idea.
It is. Clarissa Pinkola Estes uses this haunting image in her introduction. She describes myth as necklace of lights strung across the eons.
Like a guidance system.
A lifeline. Each story is a light on that chain, a message from the collective human experience saying, look, here is the path through the dark. And Campbell's core argument is that we need a specific grammar to read those messages. And for him, that grammar is psychoanalysis.
Which makes total sense. If myths are the dreams of the culture, then you need a kind of cultural psychologist to interpret them.
You need to understand the grammar of symbols. Because the central thesis of this book, the systems view we're taking, is that the hero's journey is an algorithm.
An algorithm.
It's a functional process designed to do one thing, to shift your center of gravity.
Shift it from where to where, exactly.
From the socially conditioned self, that's the person you were trained to be by your parents, your school, your job, to the transcendent self.
Okay, socially conditioned self, I get that. That's me worrying about my credit score and what my neighbors think of my lawn.
Yes.
But transcendent self starts to sound a little bit, ooh, what are we actually talking about here in practical terms?
We're talking about the part of you that isn't defined by your social role. The part of you that exists before you're a host or a voter or a son or a daughter. It's the biological, vital core of your being. The myth is the machine that moves you from the mask you wear to the face behind that mask.
And this machine, you're saying, it has 3 main gears.
3 core stages. The nuclear unit of the monomyth, as he calls it, separation, initiation, and return.
So let's run the diagnostic. Let's start with phase 1, separation. This is where the old pattern breaks.
And it almost always begins with a glitch in the system. Campbell calls it the call to adventure. Now, as we said, Hollywood has trained us to think of this as this grand, exciting moment.
Hook. Gandalf knocking on the door.
Exactly. A letter arrives by owl. It feels like an invitation to something fun.
But that's not how it works structurally.
Structurally, in the psyche, the call is almost always experienced as a negative. It's a system error signal. It's a sign of imbalance. It means the current version of you has expired and is no longer fit for purpose.
Can you give me a concrete example of what that looks like in the mythology? Not the movie version, the raw version.
The fairy tale of the Frog King is a classic example that Campbell dissects brilliantly. You have a princess. Now, princess here isn't just a title. It's a symbol for the ego.
The established order.
The established order. She's beautiful, wealthy, innocent. She lives in a palace, a walled garden. She is the status quo.
Okay.
And she goes out to play near a deep, dark spring, a well. And she has this perfect golden ball. The ball represents her perfection, her self-contained world. And what happens?
She drops it. It rolls away.
She drops it. It rolls away from her and sinks into the abyss of the well. Now, on the surface, that looks like a simple accident. Whoops, I dropped my ball.
But there are no accidents in the psyche.
Freud and Campbell would say absolutely not. That blunder is the call. The conscious mind, the princess, has lost its grip on its own perfection. The golden ball has sunk into the unconscious.
And now she has to get it back. But she can't.
She can't. She cries. She bargains with herself. And then something comes up from the water. And it's not a handsome prince.
No, it's a frog. It's slimy. It's gross. It's the last thing she wants to see.
And this is the herald. The herald of the adventure is rarely something you want to see. It is loathsome or underestimated. It represents the part of life, the part of your own psyche that you have been suppressing. The frog is ugly. It lives in the mud. It's primal. The princess is repulsed by it.
Because it doesn't fit her brand. She's a princess. She doesn't do frogs.
Exactly. The system, her ego, is rejecting this new data. This is the whole systemic function of the call. The familiar life horizon has been outgrown. The old concepts no longer fit the new reality. The psyche's center of gravity is trying to shift downwards into the mud, into the reality she's been ignoring.
Which leads, of course, to the immediate reaction from the ego. No. The refusal of the call.
I am not kissing that frog.
The refusal is fascinating because it's essentially a form of psychological paralysis. It is the psyche trying to hit the snooze button on its own evolution.
It's a fixation on the past, or on the infantile ego. It's a refusal to grow up.
Campbell uses a really stark, almost tragic myth to illustrate this point, the story of Daphne.
Yes, Daphne. It's such a powerful and tragic image. She's a nymph, and she's being pursued by the god Apollo. Now, Apollo is the sun. He is enlightenment. He represents the call to a higher, broader consciousness, a new phase of life.
He wants to impregnate her.
Symbolically, yes, to create something new with her. And she runs.
She's terrified.
She flees. She calls out to her father, the river god,
Yeah.
to save her from this adventure. She begs to be kept just the way she is, to never change. And her father answers her prayer. He turns her into a laurel tree.
Which is safety, I guess?
It's safety, but it's death. Not a physical death, but a psychological one. She becomes wood. Bark grows over her skin. Her feet become roots. She is fixed to the spot. She is safe from the god, but her growth is permanently, irrevocably arrested.
So the system froze. It just crashed.
It crashed. And Campbell argues that when you refuse the call, the adventure doesn't just go away. It inverts. It turns into a negative compulsion.
A neurosis?
A neurosis, an obsession, a chronic anxiety. If you don't willingly go on the journey comes for you. But it comes as a symptom, as a pathology. You become a victim who needs to be saved, rather than a hero on a quest.
That is genuinely terrifying. It's like your own psyche is saying, update your software or we will brick your phone.
That is essentially the ultimatum of the monomyth. Update or you will obsolete yourself.
Okay, so let's say you don't turn into a tree. You accept the call, or maybe the frog just bullies you into it. The next step in the pattern is receiving help. Supernatural aid.
This is the appearance of the protective figure. It's the little old crone on the side of the road, the wise wizard, the cosmic mother figure.
The fairy godmother.
The fairy godmother, yes. In the fairy tales, it's often an old woman who asks for a drink of water. If you're kind to her, if you pass that small test, she gives you a magic ring or a piece of advice.
Why are they always old? Why not a young, strong guide?
Because they represent the accumulated wisdom of the species. They are the past, handing the necessary tools to the future. Structurally, this represents the benign, protecting power of destiny itself. It's a signal to the hero. You are leaving the known world, but don't worry, the universe has a structure, and here is a key to help you navigate it.
But that key only gets you to the door, and the door is guarded. You call this the first threshold.
And this is where the real work, the real danger begins. Standing at the very edge of the known world are the threshold guardians.
I always picture airport security here, or maybe the bouncer at an exclusive club.
That's a great modern analogy, but make it more psychological. The guardians represent the limits of your current sphere of existence. They are your social norms. They are your fear of embarrassment. They are the voice of your parents in your head saying, don't you dare go in there. They are the police. They are common sense.
So their job is to keep people in.
Their job is to keep the unready out. They are like the membrane of a cell. To advance, the hero has to pass beyond the veil. Campbell describes the zone beyond them as a desert, a jungle, or deep water. It's the unknown with a capital U.
And once you cross that line, you're in the danger zone. This leads to a concept that I think is constantly misunderstood, the belly of the whale.
Yes. This is so important. People often confuse this with just crossing the threshold. They think, okay, I crossed the line, so now I'm in the whale. But the belly of the whale is a distinct and much more terrifying stage.
How so?
The threshold is crossing a border. The belly of the whale is annihilation.
It's not just walking into a dark room, it's being eaten by the room.
Swallowed whole. Campbell, of course, cites the story of Jonah, but he also brings in the Zulu myth, where a mother and her children are swallowed by an elephant. Or the Greek hero Heracles, who has to jump down the throat of a sea monster to kill it from the inside.
But why? What is the function of being eaten? That sounds like a game over screen.
It's a system shutdown. It's a hard reboot. The belly of the whale is both a womb and a tomb. The hero doesn't conquer the beast at this stage. He is swallowed by it in order to die. He has to die to his temporal, ego-bound self.
So the princess from the beginning has to completely dissolve.
Completely. Campbell draws this incredible parallel to the architecture of a temple. Have you ever noticed how many ancient temples have gargoyles or terrifying statues at the entrance?
Yeah, I always thought that was to scare away evil spirits or something.
It's to scare you, to warn you that you are leaving the mundane secular world. The gargoyles are the threshold guardians, and the dark interior of the temple, that is the belly of the whale.
Wow.
If you are not ready to die to your worldly identity, to your name, your job, your social status, you cannot enter the sacred space. When you walk between those gargoyles, you are giving your consent to be digested by the divine.
Digested is such a visceral word.
It has to be, because the person who walks out of the temple or is spit out by the whale cannot be the same person who walked in. If they are, the system has failed. Separation isn't just a change of address. It's the death of the old identity.
Which means we are now a blank slate. We are formless. And that sets the stage for phase 2. Initiation. The reprogramming.
This is the main body of the myth. The hero is now in the dream landscape, Normal rules of physics and society no longer apply. And the first stage here is what Campbell calls the road of trials.
The classic training montage sequence.
The montage, yes. But let's look closer at what's actually happening in these trials. It's not just about fighting bad guys or learning to use a sword. It is a systematic deconstruction of the self.
How so?
Campbell draws these incredible parallels to shamanic initiations in Siberia, the Yakut and Tungus tribes.
You mentioned this idea of dismemberment. I really want to hear the details of this because it sounds absolutely gruesome.
It's horrific. When a young man in these tribes is called to be a shaman, he doesn't go to a school. He falls into a profound sickness. He goes into a trance that can last for days.
Okay.
And in that trance, he meets the spirits of his ancestors. And they don't give him a book to read. They attack him.
Attack him how? Physically? In the vision.
In a vision, yes. They took a great iron hook and they tear his flesh from his bones. They boil his eyes. They count his bones one by one to make sure everything is there. The initiate watches this entire process happen to his own body as if from a distance.
He watches himself be taken apart piece by piece.
Yes, and only after he has been reduced to a bare skeleton, to the essential indestructible structure, only then do the spirits put him back together with new flesh, a new body.
That is profoundly intense. Why is that necessary? Why all the violence?
Because the road of trials is about stripping away the ego's defenses. Our flesh, in this sense, is our vanity, our learned behaviors, our softness, our prejudices. The trials burn all of that away. You are being broken down to your component parts so you can be rebuilt as something stronger, something capable of holding a higher spiritual charge.
So you're a skeleton now, metaphorically. You've survived the trials, and then you have the meeting with the goddess.
The meeting with the goddess. Now, we have to be very careful here. This is where the modern mind immediately tries to turn it into a romance novel. Oh, the hero finds his girlfriend.
The love interest, right.
It is not a love interest. The goddess represents the totality of the universe. She is the ultimate knowledge of reality. She is the mother, the sister, the mistress, yes, but she's also the womb and the tomb.
There's that phrase again, the womb and the tomb.
Campbell is relentless with this dual imagery because it's at the core of reality. He references the image of the sow, the female pig that sometimes eats her own farrow. She eats her own piglets.
Okay, hang on. That is a genuinely disturbing image, a mother eating her own babies. Why would any culture use that as a symbol for the goddess? It seems completely anti-life.
It seems anti-sentimental, but it is profoundly pro-reality. The goddess is biology itself. Nature creates life with this incredible explosive abundance, and nature destroys life with utter cold indifference. An earthquake is the goddess, a plague is the goddess, a beautiful field of wildflowers is also the goddess.
She's the whole picture, good and bad.
She is the whole terrifying, beautiful picture. The ultimate test for the hero at this stage is, can you handle the whole picture? Can you look at the universe, which creates life and eats it, and accept it all with love? If the hero shrinks away, if he judges the goddess as evil because she eats the piglet, he fails the test.
Why?
Because he's still stuck in his ego, thinking the universe owes him kindness and comfort. The sacred marriage to the goddess isn't a wedding ceremony. It's an act of radical acceptance of the cruelty and beauty of life as one single, inseparable thing.
A lesson in non-dualism.
Precisely. Realizing that the benign and the terrible are just two faces of the same biological cosmic energy.
Okay, so you've made peace with Mother Nature in all her terror and glory. But then you have to deal with the other side of the coin, atonement with the Father.
This is often the absolute pivot point of the entire initiation. If the mother is nature, the raw stuff of life, the father is the social order.
The law. Civilization.
The law. The authority. The superego, in Freudian terms. And Campbell notes that in so many myths, the father first appears as an ogre, a tyrant, a wrathful god who throws lightning bolts and demands sacrifice.
Think of Darth Vader in Star Wars, or, the Old Testament god in a particularly bad mood.
Precisely. The father is the thing that judges you. He represents the impossible standard you feel you failed to meet. And so the hero usually approaches the father with terror.
But Campbell doesn't call it confrontation with the father. He calls it atonement, which sounds like saying you're sorry.
At one-ment, becoming one with. And here's the psychological twist that I find the most profound in the entire book. The ogre aspect of the father. It's a projection from the hero himself.
Wait, explain that. How is Darth Vader a projection?
The hero projects his own unresolved fear and guilt onto the father figure. The hero feels small, or guilty, or rebellious. That's the ad screaming. And because he feels guilty, he imagines the father must be angry. He paints the face of a monster onto the face of authority.
So the monster is actually in the hero's head.
The monster is the hero's fear of judgment.
I have to push back on that a little bit. What if your father was genuinely abusive? What if this system is actually tyrannical and oppressive? Isn't it a form of gaslighting to say, oh, it's just your projection? Some fathers really are ogres.
That is a completely fair and important objection. And Campbell isn't trying to excuse real-world abuse or tyranny. He's talking about the archetypal father. Even if your biological father was a perfect saint, you will still have a psychological confrontation with the concept of authority. You will still feel the weight of the judge. The at-one-ment happens when the hero has a profound realization. The authority figure no longer holds the power to define him.
So it's about taking back your own power. You stop looking for validation.
You stop fighting the system as a petulant rebel, and you stop begging the system for approval as a needy child. You realize that you are the father now. You are the adult. You are the authority.
You become the one who holds the symbols of office.
You become the holder of the lightning bolt. The hero has to abandon what Campbell calls the double monster. He has to stop believing he's an irredeemable sinner, and he has to stop believing the father is an unforgiving tyrant. When those two delusions collapse at the same time, the father embraces him. The projection dissolves.
That's a massive psychological shift. You go from being the victim of the rules to being the maker of the rules.
You integrate the system into yourself, which leads to the climax of the initiation, apotheosis.
Which literally means becoming a god.
It means reaching a state of divine knowledge.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate realization of that essential non-duality we talked about with the goddess. Campbell uses the figure of the bodhisattva here, the enlightened one who transcends the pairs of opposites.
The pairs of opposites, you hear that phrase a lot in Eastern philosophy. But what does it actually look like to a human being? Are we talking about seeing good and evil as the same thing? Because that sounds dangerous.
It sounds dangerous to the ego, because the ego's entire job is to pick sides. I am good, he's bad, this is safe, that is dangerous. Apotheosis is the view from the mountaintop. From up there, you can see that the predator and the prey are both necessary parts of one ecosystem.
Okay.
You see that birth and death are just two sides of one wave. And then you have the final realization. You are not the wave, you are the ocean.
And from that state of being, you receive the prize, the ultimate boon.
The boon, the holy grail, the elixir of life, the golden fleece.
In the movies, this is the suitcase full of money or the secret weapon that can destroy the Death Star.
But psychologically, the boon is never a thing. The boon is simply the realization that the hero, and always was, the very thing he was seeking. The elixir is imperishable being.
Yeah.
You don't get it from outside. You realize you are it, and always have been. The entire search was a circle. You went all the way around the world just to find out that what you were looking for was in your own pocket the whole time.
Okay, so let's just recap this insane journey. You heard the call from a frog. You got past the threshold guardians. You were swallowed by a whale and rebooted. You were dismembered by spirits. You married the goddess of life and death. You became one with the Father. You realized you are the ocean. You have the Grail.
Yes, and this is where most of us, and most movies, want to roll credits. And they lived happily ever after.
But Campbell says, not so fast.
He says this is where the system gets truly difficult. You were only halfway through the algorithm, you have to come back. And that brings us to phase 3, the return.
Why is this the hardest part? You've won, you have the Grail, just walk home and show everyone.
Because
Yeah.
Why on earth would you want to?
Because
Oh?
home is where your friends are, where your bed is.
Home is where the taxes are. Home is where the petty arguments over the recycling bin are. Home is where people are worrying about things that you now know with absolute certainty are illusions. The hero has touched the infinite, the void, enlightenment. They have seen the truth with a capital T. And now they're expected to go back to a world of fractions and trivialities and talk about the weather.
This is the refusal of the return.
It's a very common spiritual trap. Campbell mentions that even the Buddha, after achieving enlightenment under the boot tree, seriously doubted whether he should teach anyone.
Really? The Buddha.
Yes. He thought, no one is going to understand this. It's too subtle. It's too difficult. Why should I even bother? I'll just stay here in this state of nirvana.
So the danger is the hero becomes a hermit on a mountaintop.
Or a cynic. Or just checks out entirely. But the cosmic cycle demands a return. Structurally, if the hero doesn't bring the boon back, it's lost to the world. The system creates a closed loop and dies of stagnation. The energy has to flow back into the community to renew it.
So how do they get back if they don't want to come?
Well, sometimes it's a magic flight. If the hero stole the boon-like Prometheus, stealing fire from the gods, the return is a frantic chase. He's pursued by the Furies. He has to run for his life.
And other times, they are just stuck.
Rescue from without. This is when the hero is in such a deep mystical trance or state of bliss that society has to physically come and get him. Someone has to go into the cave and drag him back to reality. But the real structural challenge, the most difficult part, is crossing the return threshold.
This sounds like the re-entry shock, like a spaceship hitting the atmosphere and burning up.
That's the perfect analogy. It is the two worlds problem. The hero has to survive the impact of bringing a high-voltage truth into a low-voltage world. If you touch a live high-voltage wire to a simple toaster, what happens?
The toaster explodes.
The toaster explodes. So the hero either blows up his friends and family with the truth they can't handle, or he blows up himself from the frustration of being misunderstood. He seems crazy to them.
So how do you prevent that? How do you step down the voltage?
Campbell uses this fantastic concept here. He talks about the need for insulation.
Insulation, like wearing rubber gloves.
Exactly like that, but socially, like a costume. He mentions Somerset Maugham's stories about Englishmen in the jungle who would religiously dress for dinner every night in full tuxedos, or the priest putting on a collar, or the judge wearing robes.
We usually think of those as just stuffy, old-fashioned formalities. Oh, look at him putting on his fancy robes.
But structurally, they are insulation. They are social costumes that protect the hero from being grounded out and neutralized by the mundane world. The role protects the person inside. The shaman puts on a mask and a rattle to return to the tribe. If he walked back in as just Bob, no one would listen to him, or his energy would be too raw and intense. The mask mediates the power.
So the ritual, the costume, allows you to hold on to the charge of the other world without burning out yourself or everyone around you.
Precisely. And the ultimate goal is to become the master of two worlds.
To be bilingual in reality.
To be able to pass back and forth between them seamlessly. To be in the deep sleep of the eternal and the waking day of the temporal at the exact same time. You can pay your taxes and know you are eternal. You can argue with your neighbor about their dog and see them as a manifestation of the divine.
And the final result of achieving that state is what Campbell calls freedom to live.
Living in the present moment. Free from the anxiety of the future or the regret of the past. The system is rebooted, the software is updated, the user now has administrator privileges.
So we've mapped the entire algorithm: separation, initiation, return. We've gone through the whole cycle. But I want to zoom out for a minute. This show is called Crisis in Perception. We look at systems. How does this mythic structure actually function as a social system? Because so far it sounds like a very solitary individual trip.
That's the right question. We have to map the actors and the incentives on a larger scale. Think about the individual psyche as the microcosm and the universal order, or society, as the macrocosm.
Okay.
Life, by its very nature, runs down, it creates entropy, things get stale.
Society gets rigid.
Exactly. Consciousness gets tired. Society becomes sclerotic. Laws and customs that used to make sense become oppressive. The good king inevitably becomes the tyrant. This is an unavoidable part of the cycle.
So the system needs a refresh button, a hard reset.
It needs to tap into the unconscious dark, the unknown, to renew itself. This is what Campbell calls the cosmogonic cycle. Consciousness is always moving from waking to dream to deep sleep and then back to waking. Myth is the mechanism that ensures this circulation continues. It keeps the energy flowing between the known world and the unknown world.
So the hero is like a red blood cell. Its job is to carry oxygen from the lungs, the unknown, to the muscles of the body, the known world.
That's a fantastic metaphor. And if the hero is the red blood cell, then rituals are the capillaries that deliver the oxygen to the tissues. Campbell makes a very strong point that rituals, specifically rites of passage, are the socialized version of the myth.
Explain that. How is a ritual a myth?
A ritual is a myth enacted in the real world. It is the software installation process for a whole group of people. Take a primitive puberty rite, for example. The men of the tribe come and forcibly take a young boy away from his mother.
That's separation, acted out.
They take him into a cave or a special hut. They scare him. They might knock out a tooth or give him a ritual scar. They teach him the sacred secrets of the ancestors.
Initiation and the rotor trials.
And then they bring him back to the village, give him a new name, and he is treated as a man from that day forward.
Return. He's reinstalled into the society with a new role.
Exactly. Without that ritual, the software doesn't update properly. You get a 40-year-old boy. The psyche doesn't get the official notification that it has permission to mature into the next stage.
There's a fascinating insight from a psychoanalyst, Dr. Geza Roheim, that Campbell cites regarding this social function. He calls medicine men and shamans lightning conductors.
That is one of the most profound systems insights in the entire book. Dr. Roheim argues that the shaman is essentially acting out the group's collective madness in a controlled way. He is a lightning conductor for common anxiety.
What does that mean exactly? The whole group is anxious, so the shaman gets sick on their behalf.
In a way, yes. The shaman goes into the trance, he fights the demons, he enacts the infantile body destruction fantasies, the being torn apart we talked about earlier. He processes the unconscious terror that everyone in the tribe feels on some level, but he does it publicly, ritually, and safely.
So the shaman goes crazy so the rest of the tribe can stay sane.
Precisely. He localizes the crisis, he processes the trauma for the group. It's a psychological safety valve. If you don't have the shaman or the ritual or the shared myth, that anxiety doesn't just disappear.
It disseminates. It spreads through the population.
It spreads into the population. Everyone becomes a little bit crazy. Everyone becomes a little bit neurotic.
Yeah.
Because there is no central processor for the dark stuff anymore.
Which brings us squarely and uncomfortably to the present day and to the crisis. Campbell is pretty blunt about this. He famously says, "Dead are all the gods."
It's a stark and devastating assessment. He argues that the long-inherited symbolic systems have collapsed under the weight of democracy, science, and the machine age. We have moved from the group being the carrier of meaning to the individual being the soul carrier.
And the consequence of that is that the lightning conductor is gone.
We are all expected to be our own lightning conductors now. The modern individual has to face the gargoyles of their own psyche completely alone. There is no mystagogue, no guide, no shared ritual to say, okay, what you're feeling is normal, now you're crossing the threshold.
You just have a midlife crisis and buy a sports car.
Or you spiral into depression or addiction. Because we lack the map for the territory, we see what Campbell calls inverted emphasis. This is a really striking point. He says that instead of initiating our youth away from the mother, away from dependency, modern culture actively encourages clinging to it.
We fetishize youth. We're terrified of aging.
We refuse the call to adulthood. We refuse the return. We want to stay in the garden of childhood forever. And the result is pathology. In the absence of a general shared mythology, people fall into private, neurotic dream myths. They develop obsessions and fixations. Campbell uses this haunting phrase for it, remaining in the toy room at the bottom of the sea.
That is a chilling phrase, the toy room at the bottom of the sea.
It implies a state of being submerged in the depths of the unconscious, at the bottom of the sea. But instead of integrating the immense power of the deep, you're just down there playing with childish things. It's Peter Pan in Atlantis.
So if the old system is broken, and we can't just go back to being tribal hunters in a forest, what is the hero's task today? What does this look like for us?
Campbell is clear on this. The modern hero isn't a tribal warrior slaying dragons. The modern hero is a psychological adventurer. The entire quest has shifted from the external world to the internal one.
So the journey is self-analysis.
It is. Campbell explicitly frames psychoanalysis, or any form of deep psychological work, as the new initiation. The task is to journey inward, dissolve the personal unconscious, and link up with the archetypal, universal human values that lie beneath. But, and this is absolutely critical, the goal is not to do it just for yourself.
Right, this isn't about self-care so you can be a more productive employee.
It is not about feeling good. It's about creating a truly human community. The goal of the modern hero, as Campbell sees it, is to transcend the tribal or nationalistic divisions, which are just larger collective versions of the ego, and find the common human connection. To bring back a boon that serves the whole species, not just your local clan.
That's a very tall order. It means we each have to build our own systems of meaning, largely from scratch, using these ancient blueprints.
It does, but the blueprint is there. That's the hopeful message in the book. The structure is innate. We can't escape the monomyth because, in a way, it is wired into our biology. We just have to learn how to read the map again.
So let's bring this all home. What does this book help us see differently? How does it change our perception?
I think, first and foremost, it forces us to rethink the very nature of identity. We tend to think of who we are as a fixed thing. I am name, I am an accountant, I am American. The hero with 1,000 faces teaches us that identity is a fluid process. It's a constant necessary cycle of self-annihilation and rebirth. If you aren't dying to who you were yesterday, you aren't really living today.
And on a systemic level, it means realizing that myth isn't bad science. It's not a failed attempt to explain where rain comes from.
It is a successful attempt to organize the psychological world. It's good systems management for the human soul.
I want to end on a provocation, something you mentioned when we were preparing for this. You talked about the figure of the dragon, the ultimate enemy. Campbell calls the dragon holdfast.
Holdfast. It's such a perfect descriptive name.
What does it represent in the system?
The dragon is the keeper of the past.
Yeah.
The dragon hoards gold, but it never spends it. It just sits on it, guarding it.
It guards the accumulated value of the culture.
But by guarding it so jealously, it prevents that value from circulating. It causes stagnation. Holdfast is the tyrant of the status quo. And in every system, whether it's a government, a corporation, or your own mind, there is a holdfast. There is a force that says, do not change. Keep things exactly as they are. This is mine.
So the question to leave our listeners with is, what is the holdfast in your own life right now? What is the dragon that is sitting on your gold, preventing the necessary disintegration and renewal?
Because the crisis in perception isn't that the world is broken. The world is always breaking. The crisis is that we lack the symbolic tools to read the breakage as a necessary part of a renewal cycle. We see the gargoyles at the gate and we run away instead of realizing they are marking the door to the temple.
That is a lot to chew on, and if you want to chew on it more, the source material for this deep dive is Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and we'd specifically recommend the commemorative edition with that incredible introduction by Clarissa Pinkola Estes.
We highly encourage you to go to a library, borrow a copy, or buy one. The diagrams in the book and the specific tales he analyzes, like the story of the summons of the Great Father Snake or the intricacies of the Navajo twin heroes, which we didn't even get to touch, are absolutely worth the time. We've only been able to scratch the surface here.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next. Thanks for listening.